I call the regular meeting of the City of Ashland Planning Commission to order for September 9th, 2025. The Planning Commission is conducting in-person regular meetings. However, the ability to participate electronically is continuing. These meetings are via Zoom pursuant to state law. The public can find information on how to participate in Planning Commission meetings in our public notices, and directions on how to find the full meeting materials, applications, and staff reports on the city's website are also included in our public notices. I note that we have 5 of the 6 commissioners present, so we do have a quorum. I will turn to Brandon for staff announcements.
Thank you, Chair Werner. I would note that the City Council did not have a meeting at their first Tuesday in September, so I don't have any updates from Council, but I will note that the City Administration Office, Jordan Rooklin, who spoke to you previously about code changes, we're going to be coming back to your September 23rd meeting with a discussion item for special events specifically in order to get Commission to look at the potential ordinance amendments that would affect Chapter 18 and provide comments before a draft is ready for hearings. I also wanted to note that the property at 231 Granite Street, which was a single-family home on hillside lands approved by this commission, approved by council on appeal, and remanded to this commission for revision to findings, that upon sending out findings, the city did receive notice that this has been appealed to the Land Use Board of Appeals, and the record has now been assembled and forwarded to LUBA. So it is at this point the final decision the city's been made, and we'll wait for the Land Use Board of Appeals hearings. And that's all I have for updates.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, we have the consent agenda in front of us. It's approval of the August 12th, 2025 regular meeting minutes. Would somebody like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor? Aye.
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 It passed. We're now on to public forum. If anybody in the audience would like to speak to the commission on an item that's not on our agenda, please fill out the pink form on the wall over there, and we'll recognize you. So I don't see anybody leaping to that opportunity, so we'll move on. We have unfinished business. Approval of findings for PA-T2-2025-00059, final plan. Approval for 15-lot performance standard option PSO subdivision known as Kestrel Park 3 at Nandina Street and Stone Ridge Way in North Mountain area. And we made this decision and voted on it at our August 12th meeting. Does anybody have any questions on what's in front of us? And if you do have some, please make them now. And we can change the wording that's there, but we cannot actually change our decision. Russell, you look like you want to say something. No?
No.
Okay, then I would entertain a motion to adopt what we have in our packet. Go for it.
I move that the Planning Commission approve the findings, conclusions, and orders for the planning action PA-T2 2025-0059, adopting the modifications to the previously approved outline plan and site design review, and granting final plan approval for the Kestrel Park Phase 3, consistent with the evidence in the record and subject to the conditions of approval set forth in the findings.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, Michael, will you call the roll?
Commissioner Phillips.
Aye.
Commissioner McCracken-Jen.
Aye.
Commissioner Marr.
Aye.
Chair Werner.
Aye. Okay, we approve that, and we'll move on now to our discussion items for the main item on the agenda, public meeting law training with our deputy city attorney.
All right, can everyone hear me okay? Well, first off, I'm just very excited to be here. I think the Planning Commission has such an important role, and it's good to know the rules so that you guys can do your job and feel confident in your role in the city. Sort of my goal for this is I do not expect that you will know every single rule, but I think my goal for you, if I had one, would be that you could walk away with the red flags in the back of your head, so that as you guys continue with your public service, if there's an ethical question that kind of pops up, you'll have at least the wherewithal to pause, think about it before acting, maybe consult with staff, refer to the authorities. So that's kind of my goal for you, and this is going to be an overview that highlights the main things that public officials really come across. In this, we'll talk about ethics, we'll talk about public meetings, and then a few sort of form questions that might help you discuss as a body. Kind of as I stated, so the mindset for some of the ethics is thinking about how to be rule-based. It's not what you might personally think. It's not a question of morality, but these are the rules that are based in statute and some of the decisions that come down from the Ethics Commission. I'll start with the very clear rule, prohibited use of office, and the, oh wait, I don't have a pointer. But the ORS language is at the very bottom. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but the gist of it is that a public official may not use or attempt to use the official position or office for any personal gain, financial gain, or avoidance of financial detriment. And who does it apply to? It applies to the public official, relative, member of the household, or any business which a public official or relative is associated with. And again, all of those are defined by statute. Who is a public official? For stating the obvious, in your role as a planning commission, all of you are public officials. All city staff are public officials, and so these are roles that I think about, staff thinks about, and you in your role as a planning commission are also a public official.
Can I interrupt and ask a question?
Sure.
Is that okay?
Yeah, and then if it's something that I know I'm going to get to, I might just
Defer?
defer.
Okay.
Yeah.
In the literature that we have in front of us, it talked about public officers. Is that the same thing as a public official?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell whether they were talking about police officers or not.
Well, in both would apply. Public officer, police officers, public officers, which would be like me or Brandon, public official. I think some people end up using the word interchangeably. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
And this definition has it clear that as an elected official is a public official. So some examples of no-nos is promising future employment for someone, using confidential information for financial gain, representation before a government body for a fee, A person may not attempt to represent or represent a client for a client of fee before the governing body of which the person is a member. So say you can't, for example, you can't represent if you represent a developer, you cannot also be a voting member on that matter, because then the conflict of interest would be exposed. So that's kind of an example of things that you can look out for, is if, even if the financial benefit is a few steps down the line, think about if you have an interaction with something that is going before you, if you have a financial benefit to something that's before you. That's your red flag. This is some definitions for what a relative is: spouse, parent, step-parent, child, sibling, son or daughter-in-law, anyone you have anyone that you have a legal obligation to support, your spouse's parent, step-parent, child. Who is relative continued? Any individual where you provide benefits from your employment, individual who provides you benefits from their employment, but otherwise no one else was included in this definition, so cousins, uncles, aunts. And again, that's the red flag to be when you're thinking about ethical conflicts of who does it apply to. Conflict of interest is the kind of phrase, the catchphrase for the analysis for understanding and having that pause button for if there is a conflict of interest, i.e. financial, or in this case, or to say a little bit more specifically, an actual conflict or a potential conflict. The phrase conflict of interest refers to that dual role that you want to avoid, where you are voting on something that you might actually benefit from. Actual conflict and potential conflicts are also defined terms. Actual conflict, the decision would be to the private pecuniary benefit or detriment of 1, the person, or 2, the person's relative, or 3, any businesses with which the person or a relative of the person is associated. So even if you might not personally benefit, if your daughter benefits and you're like giving I'm not saying you as in anyone in this body, but like, but you're giving kickbacks to to your daughter, that would implicate the conflict of interest rules. And a potential conflict is a decision that could be that sort of benefit. A potential conflict is much more difficult to determine because it's something that you could have a conflict of interest. Maybe you have a business startup and it seems like the body's going to vote on something in the future that your business might benefit from. Depending on the facts, maybe it's so outside the realm of possibilities that it's really not a conflict, but maybe it's so close that it is, and it's something that you should get advice on. Yeah.
To your last statement, that getting advice is the way to proceed, I did find it interesting on page 47 where it says, in a potential conflict of interest, disclosure is required, but the decision maker may participate in the decision.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, and I'll get into that in a few slides later on.
Great, thanks.
Actual conflict, if you discover an actual conflict of interest, you must disclose the nature of the conflict and recuse yourself from both voting and debating as the public official. Recusing yourself from a vote will not eliminate a quorum. So still attend that meeting, even if you know that you have an actual conflict. One sort of red flag here is to make sure you don't deliberate. I know sometimes it's you just disclose your conflict and then be silent. You don't want the rule here is really designed for, you don't want to get into an advocacy position when you're saying, hey, I have a conflict, and then advocate for a position that the body is going to vote on. So that you just want to state your conflict, avoid kind of the too much debate about it, and then let the body go on. Yeah.
So historically, like if I worked on a project, the rule was to not be at the meeting at all.
Oh.
So I wonder what that reality is, and I'm not sure why that became the rule.
I think it is in order to not impart any kind of sway on your fellow commissioners on the vote. There have been circumstances where commissioners have left the dais and gone out into the lobby during that deliberation. I think the important part, though, is that if you are needed for the purpose of a quorum, that let's say that we know that we have 2 absences and or 3 absences, and if you were gone, we wouldn't have a quorum. You can attend the meeting. You can sit at the dais. You just don't speak to the item
Okay.
and not vote on it. And that way a quorum is met and a decision of the body can be made.
Okay.
But I think you're right.
I thought there was something legal about it.
No, I think it was a best practice, but
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. I think the best practice and the legal requirement may kind of gotten along the way had gotten kind of blended a little bit, but yeah, the legal requirement is such that you state the conflict and abstain from debate. But I think I imagine what, as Brandon said, along the way there might have been a little bit, probably too much engagement where best practice was like, you know what, let's just remove so that the person with the financial interest is not weighing in on the vote.
Yeah, I think it was probably in response to the community,
Or community, yeah.
community not wanting, yeah. There was more contentious stuff going on at that time. Okay,
Yeah.
that answers my question,
Yeah.
sorry.
Just,
Um,
sorry, one quick
yeah.
question, just a quick clarification. So do you state the nature of the conflict, or you just state that you have a conflict?
You state the nature. So for example, I am abstaining from this vote because because I own a business that blah. So it can be, the preference would just to be brief, again, to avoid too much of kind of a debate like engagement. So yeah, my recommendation is to disclose and just a brief nature of the conflict. Yeah. This is probably something that will very rarely come up, but there is a rule, it's called the rule of necessity, that someone can participate in a vote if it's absolutely necessary for a quorum. Those situations are so rare when everyone has the same conflict. I imagine that rule probably happens for really small communities. I just mentioned that as a unlikely scenario, but it is possible. Potential conflict of interest. If you discover a potential conflict of interest, you also must announce at the meeting the existence of the nature of the conflict. Recusing yourself is not legally required. Sometimes it can be best practice, since especially if the if the line between an actual conflict and a potential conflict is really close, then the easiest route is to just recuse yourself. And if you think you're on the line for a potential conflict of interest being actual, then I encourage everyone to certainly communicate with staff and reach out for some extra advice. But that goes without saying, potential conflict, you can state it and proceed with a vote. Let's see, if you do not recuse yourself, you should allow the applicant or members of the audience to question you on the conflict, not mentioned in statute, but can be helpful for a clear record. And then some, and this is kind of an example of an actual conflict that I had in my notes is, say your son owns a business in the district and the agency is deciding upon whether or not to accept your son's business application because your decision, this would be an actual conflict because your decision would affect that relative financially. It changes if it's a volunteer position. Potential conflict. Example of it being that same hypothetical being potential. Say your son owns a business in the district and the business directly adjacent to his business applies for a facade improvement grant because your decision could affect a relative financially in the increase of property value. You could disclose the potential conflict and then proceed with a vote. Or recuse yourself, that would be your discretion. So to summarize, what to do, when in doubt, shout it out. State the nature of your conflict, do it before discussing the matter, do it on the record, and do it at every meeting it's discussed. And talk to staff ahead of time. And again, the trickier, and even though it might sound obvious, I think the trickier examples can be actually quite difficult to determine. So always proceed slowly. There are some exceptions to financial. There are some exceptions to the general rule. Gifts are one of them. So neither you nor a member of your household should solicit or receive directly or indirectly a gift of more than $50 from anyone or a single source within a calendar year that could reasonably be known to have a legislative or administrative interest. This means an economic interest, which is different from that of the general public. So again, the purpose is I'm giving you this because, and it's over $50 in a calendar year, and the purpose is for you to vote my way on something. The number $50 is relatively, can be, for clear examples out there of where there's been like bribery, $50 might not seem much in comparison to some pretty outrageous cases. But you can imagine where a rule like this comes from, where the legislature was like, we're just going to have a clear line, $50 in a calendar year. Some of the things you should be aware of is making sure it's in with a calendar year, making sure the gift is an economic, like evaluate its economic value, like say the gift isn't like something that you purchase at a store, but you'll have to, it's the market value, which, depending on that situation, could be a little bit more complicated. Of course, the easiest answer for those types of scenarios is just to deny the gift. And I guess the rule of thumb, if anyone comes to you and says, hey, here's a gift that's $51, and I'm giving it to you in your role at the Planning Commission. Beware. Of course, there are exceptions to this, like if there's travel, if there's a travel expense for a conference. So there are minor exceptions like that that aren't actually considered gifts. Honoraria is another, I'm not even, it's not, I guess, a exception or something sort of outside the criteria for what constitutes a conflict of interest, but honoraria is acceptable. Something like a plaque, commemorative tokens, and again, just be aware of if anything's over $50. Oh yeah, and there it is. Beyond that, you should probably decline the gift. Nepotism, the general rule, you may not appoint, employ, or promote a relative or member of the household to a position with the public body that the public official serves or over which the public official exercises jurisdiction or control. It includes participating in interviews, discussions, debates about the appointments. There is the exception for unpaid volunteers. But similar to the family rule, the theme that I kind of talked about earlier with the family member giving a financial benefit to a family member, this almost fits into a similar vein where you don't want to promote the family member because they are your relative. If the family member goes through an application process without your involvement and that applicant kind of rises to the top, then great. But it's just that your involvement would be a problem in that. I don't know how much this body would interact with this rule. It might be a little bit more of a public works one, but interest in public contracts. A person who ceases to hold a position as a public official may not have a direct financial interest in a public contract authorized by that body for 2 years after the contract was authorized. Authorization means that the public official performed a significant role in the selection of the contractor or the execution of the contract. And if this happens to you, again, just pause and get advice. But usually the scenario I can imagine this happening would be for a very large contract. The public official is involved, not like lockstep in a way, and then you'll just have to be aware that for 2 years after the contract was authorized, wait, did I say it right? If you voted, then you have to wait 2 years before you would have involvement in a public contract. And so if you, 1 year after the authorization of a contract, you had involvement in a very large contract, then you would be at risk. I don't think this body has those types of decisions. Maybe it might be a little bit more council related, but just a flag. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, I mixed up my words there for a second, so apologies. Part 2, public records. Again, all the public record law is governed by ORS Chapter 192, and the purpose for this is transparency in government. Generally, the city has two legal requirements when it comes to public records, that we keep public records for specified amounts of time, and that the public records must be available to members of the public upon request unless an exception applies. Am I going to get into this note later? Okay, no. The important thing to note here is just how broad a public record really is. It includes any writing that contains information relating to the conduct of public's business. Pretty much anything. All of your email, even text messages related to city business, possibly. And so, if you want to talk about city business, just know that it also can be the kind of front page of the news. So, because the purpose is to promote transparency, and the public record laws are purposely built to be quite broad. There are a lengthy amount of exceptions, but those exceptions end up being quite brief. So, strong caveat there. Oh, here we go. Some practical tips. I believe all of you have a city, oh no. Oh, okay. Well, maybe we should look into that. Well, yeah, maybe we should look into getting you guys city email addresses.
Yeah.
212 commissioners in the city through all the ad hocs and all the.
Oh.
So I think that was an IT issue in terms of assigning and turnover of email addresses.
Oh, okay.
So, Robert question.
Okay. All right. Well, something we can take a look at.
But then Michael wouldn't have to deliver the packet. So I have a question about using my email on something that might be subpoenaed.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice on that? If I'm conversing with Brandon or another staff member?
Yeah. I mean, I think it could be helpful to just clearly label something as being city related. Like that can be something you can easily address in the title, so that if something ever if some matter came to it, that we're only
It'd be
we're
easy way
only
to
we're only
search.
looking at the matter that pertain to city governance.
Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, for example, attorneys do that all the time too, where if it's something that, attorneys have the duty of confidentiality, and we have attorney-client privilege. If we're giving legal advice and we're giving legal advice in an email, we'll title it attorney-client privilege, and that's something that makes it so that it's just very clearly flagged. Yeah. So that could be a practical advice.
So I did set up a separate email to
Oh.
be used for my city activities, but occasionally I still get sent information requests, et cetera, to my private email. Any advice on handling those? I don't want my private email, subpoenaed
Yeah.
was the point there.
Well, that's a really good help. I mean, that's a great idea too, is to just have a different email just for city business. Could you block or forward? Can you forward any?
That's what I
Yeah.
would suggest is if I inadvertently sent you an email to your personal account, forward it to your planning account, and that way you do maintain a record of it on subpoena. If anybody asks for any correspondence over Planning Action X, you could pull them all from your planning account. And if public emails you about a planning action on your personal account, again, forward those.
And then the other advice is to not knowingly destroy a public record. Part 3, public meetings. Oh, wait. Similar to the last theme, the purpose is to have transparency and also design it so that the decision-making is made in the public. General rule, all meetings of the governing body of a public body shall be open to the public and all persons shall be permitted to attend. City of Ashland, the Planning Commission is a public body, and a meeting is anything where a quorum is needed to either make a decision or deliberate toward a decision. In Ashland, the quorum is a majority, and here's one point I want to emphasize a little bit, is to be aware of serial communications. Serial communications are decisions in which the body is making a determination. And a determination is any action, vote, or final disposition upon a motion, proposal, resolution. You do not want to deliberate in a quorum outside of the public. That would be a violation. And so you also have to be aware of any combinations of quorums that might happen. So if A talks to B, B talks to C, and if a three-person deliberation is a quorum, that can potentially, that would be a potential violation of public meeting. So really, the best course of advice here is to try and not, if there's an action item that's before you, don't deliberate on it. That's just the clearest way you can avoid any controversy around this. If there's an action item, don't deliberate it with your fellow commissioners. If you have questions about an item that's coming to you, the best way, you can certainly reach out to staff for more information. But when it comes to the actual decision, leave that for your public meeting. And the purpose of that public meeting is so that the public's been noticed of the date, the time, what the topic is, and the public can come and provide their input. What you don't want to have, what the rule is designed to prevent against, is the either impression or actuality of elected officials making like backhanded deals and then coming forth and making a decision. The purpose is for transparency. And again, none of these statements is for you all as a body. I just kind of use the strong language sometimes to make a point for what the rule is trying to prevent against for that worst case scenario.
Can I ask a quick question? Yep. So let's say in the past you inadvertently violated the quorum requirement. Is there any way to bring that correspondence into the public record? Or is there any way to remediate that?
Oh, that's a good question. How to remediate if something like that happened? The best way?
Hypothetically.
Yeah. I'd have to get back to you. I'm not quite sure on like best practices for remediation. Yeah, I'll get back to you.
Sorry, one additional
Yeah.
clarification too? Just make sure I'm reading this right, that when it says in the definitions of governing bodies, that essentially wherever we see the word commission, we should also think committee,
Oh, yeah,
right? Mm-hmm. Okay.
yeah. Yeah, the really what body is anyone who makes, if you have a body who's making recommendations to any other body who's making a recommendation to you as a decision maker, then those bodies have to comply with public meeting too. I mean, there are scenarios where, say, it's a group of people who maybe wasn't like a bunch of say there was a number of individuals who had the same cause and came to talk at public forum. I don't think that's a body in the same way the definition's designed. So there are scenarios like that.
Well, I mean, and if a task force is formed on a temporary basis within a committee to make recommendations to the committee?
Yeah, I mean, I think the key is recommendations. If the task force is gathering information, and then the task force brings it to that subcommittee, and then the subcommittee kind of digests it, and that subcommittee has noticed and everything, then I would think you're fine, because the task force is kind of information gathering, and then that's kind of how I've seen it. But if the task force, starts getting into recommendation land, then you should take a look.
So one more question. In this section on page 47, it talks about ex parte contact being decision maker receives information, discusses land use application, or visits the site in question outside the formal public hearing. I'm curious about the visits the site because I do that with every application. Am I breaking the law?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and it was something I was just about to address because there are scenarios where it's not actually deliberation. So say this body all got drinks together and talked about the weather, your kid's baseball game, how your summer was. You're not deliberating on an action item, and so that doesn't actually meet the kind of qualifying definitions. So to answer your question more directly, or another example is trainings like this. This could actually be something like we're not deliberating about any planning commission item. We could have had it just sort of not publicized.
At Growler, guys.
And so also going to a site, if you're just checking out the site, but you're not deliberating with your colleagues, then that wouldn't be a deliberation
Okay,
that qualifies.
So the standard practice for me is to go by myself.
Oh,
But there have been times when staff has organized a site visit, and so a bunch of us have shown up to see a particular site
Yeah.
for some
Yeah.
reason or other.
Yeah, that's fine. And then it's just a good reminder that in those scenarios to not talk about and deliberate about action items.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because it helped me actually on page 53. It says specifically that certain kinds of, 2 categories of gatherings that might otherwise qualify as meetings have been exempted by statute. And one is on-site inspection of any project. So that helped me
Okay.
reading
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, and of course, if you're at the if you're at the on-site location and all of a sudden it devolves in, you're the subject of next meeting comes up and you start talking about it and deliberating about it, obviously. So, but yeah, in and of itself, there's nothing wrong with that. And in fact, as the commissioner pointed out, the rule contemplates those scenarios.
Okay, thank you.
If I can give another hypothetical, because it's happened on a number of occasions, planning commissioners or staff doing site visits may be approached by adjacent property owners, in which case it's good to tell them that to come to the meeting to provide their input, that you can't really accept it at a site visit, because if you do, it's then an ex parte conflict. Again, nothing dire, you just need to fully express that, neighbor came up to me during my site visit and said that it floods his property every year, or whatever the comment that you received, and give that to the full commission at the meeting.
Can I ask you a quick question? Are you going to cover ex parte contact more, or that's it?
I am.
Okay.
Yep. Notice requirement, I'm going to gloss over this one. Staff usually takes care of that. Voting requirement, all official actions must be decided by a public vote. Also going to kind of gloss. Oh, here are some kind of exceptions to that quorum kind of. I'm going to gloss over this one because we talked about it in already, but a social gathering as an example would be an exception. All right, ex parte rule. No decision or action of a planning commission or city governing body shall be invalid due to ex parte contact or bias resulting from ex parte contact with a member of the decision-making body if the member of the decision-making body receiving the contact places on the record the substance of any written or oral ex parte communication concerning the decision and has a public announcement of the content of the communication and of the party's right to rebuke the substance of the communication. For this next one, the overall arching point for this, and a reminder for you all, is that you are the judge, and to be very careful when anyone comes. And Brandon had a great example of you're at a site or you're walking down the street. Hey, I have a question about a specific answer. Your default should just say, I'm sorry, I should not talk about it. You can maybe tell them about the next meeting it's going to be at, but that is the best practice for those types of scenarios. Because as the judge, you want to be impartial, and you don't want to have either the impression or actual influence of sort of behind the scenes communication. Your role should be what is brought to you on an evidentiary basis. And if it happens, then you disclose and everyone moves on.
So for example, if following a decision made by the commission, you're approached by a member of the audience and asked a question while leaving, you should just politely disengage. Is that right?
After
The
the
decision's already
decision's
been
been made.
And as you leave the room, someone comes up to you and asks you a question.
I think I would still I think I would still decline because there's a chance that if the appeal came back, which I understand happens frequently enough to not engage. Is that right, Brandon?
Yeah, I would say unless you're assured that it's the final decision of the city and that there's no potential for appeal, and even if it's the final decision of this commission and it's appealed to council, council still has the purview that they can remand it to this body. So until all the appeal timelines are done it's probably best to use that same approach of, I can't speak to this outside of the meeting due to my role as a public official.
Yep. Oh, there you go. You are the judge. And this part, Brandon, if you have tidbits that you've seen in your role as director, the point I wanted to emphasize here is for the quasi-judicial decisions that I know staff puts a lot of work to identify for you, is your role is to apply the facts to the approval criteria. I'm just going to, using a judicial, very clear example, you cannot run a red light. And then there are facts where someone goes through an intersection. Was it yellow? Was it clearly red? Well, that would be a judicial determination for applying the facts of whether or not someone ran the red light, went through the intersection on a red or a yellow or a green. But your decision is not to think we should get rid of signs that direct traffic. There are a lot of countries that don't have them. Maybe we should adopt that too. Your decision shouldn't be on your personal opinion for the rule, but rather applying the evidentiary the facts to whatever the criteria is. Brandon, any tidbits for that?
The term that comes to mind is clear and objective, as opposed to a subjective determination of what a rule means.
Yeah. There are generally 3 types of meetings: executive, study session, regular business. Executive sessions are generally pretty rare. There are very limited exceptions for when we can hold an executive session. Study sessions are a great time for robust dialogue, ask questions, discuss options, express your individual matters on something that's coming up. And it's also kind of a good reminder for how you can avoid any quorum public meeting law. If you have a question that you really want to hash out with your council members, commission members, then a study session is a great time to do it, or a business meeting. And obviously provide some direction for staff. There was a Roberts rule that I kind of wanted to highlight for the body that, and I'm not as familiar with this body. I go to the parks meetings a lot, but that if there has been trouble making sure everyone's voice is heard, I'm sure that's not the case. But there is a good rule that, a rule of thumb that try and have every member be heard who wants to be heard before one person talks twice. It's just a good rule of thumb because the point is that we want to make sure everyone who wants to talk has that equal opportunity. And then regular meetings, are the time to make your motion and make a decision. Here's some resources, the Mastering Council meetings. And that's about it. Looks like I am on my 1 hour mark, exactly.
Perfect, wonderful. You can come back.
And if anyone has any questions, our office is always available for questions. And feel free to reach out to Brandon or Derek, and otherwise, thank you for all that you do in your public service. Okay.
I'll just add that the nature of the work that you guys do and the quasi-judicial application process, I think that of the committees and commissions of the city, you're probably most astute when it comes to the ethics requirements as well as the quasi-judicial requirements. And I thank you for that, because this commission is relatively easy when it comes to having to go over those items. And I know that presentations like this we do largely on an annual basis, so it's a reminder for many of you. But for some new commissioners and some that will be appointed in short order, hopefully this is information that will come in useful in the coming year. Thank you, Carmel.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, that does it for our main agenda item. Do we have anything for open discussion? Anybody have anything else they want to talk about? Beside books?
So for fear of getting a dirty look for asking a question,
Go for it.
have we decided on our retreat?
A date?
Yeah, it would be the study session date. I think it's October 21st, Tuesday, the fourth Tuesday of October, from 11 o'clock to 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock, to begin by meeting in our office. We've still not established the agenda. We'll work further with Chair Werner on some of the recommendations that we've had. I think what I can note is that public meeting law was one of the items on our expected annual retreat, and I think we've taken care of that this evening, so that'll free up time for more site visits.
Cool, I love site visits.
October 28th. Thank you, Michael.
I'm sorry,
28th?
October 28th? Okay. Okay, so put that on your calendar. Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. We have adjourned.